Hello and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box, where today I want to talk about one of the very best bands of all time, and this is Mountain. Now, this band had so many, you could approach them from so many different angles. Were they one of the first hard rock bands? Absolutely. Did they crank up the volume on both blues-based and psychedelic-based music? Absolutely. But did they always retain a soulfulness at all times, whether they were doing their hard rockers, their shuffles, their ballads, whatever? Yes. And that's what I think makes Mountain so very unique, is that they're one of the few bands who really maintained a soulful R&B based roots to their music, even when rocking harder and harder. Now they were a band of unique virtuosos who were each were off the wall. There was Leslie West, the big fat genius of guitar and deep growling vocals. There was Felix Pappalardi, skinny as a rail, a really talented bass player, close collaborator over the years with Jack Bruce, something you can really feel. Wonderful producer, tragically died when accidentally shot by his wife. One of the most charismatic drummers of all time, Corky Lang, and on organ and keys, you had Steve Knight. All together, they made up one of the hardest rocking bands of all time. And not only was their first album, Climbing, perfect from start to finish, but they had a string of great albums. There was a Leslie West solo album, ironically called Mountain, that was a mountain album in all but name. In 71, you had Nantucket Sleigh Ride, or as some people I know pronounce it, Sledge Ride, Send Your Complaints Somewhere Else. Another absolutely perfect album. 1971, in the second part of the year, they came out with a partly live album called Flowers of Evil. And they continued to come out with decent and, if not really good, albums throughout the 70s. Although by 1974, the group had kind of wound up, although they would reunite in the 80s, post Pappalardi's death. And Leslie West, in particular, would continue to play and record loads of really high quality solo albums until his death a few years ago. I think that Mountain is one of these bands that ought to be talked about in the same breath as people like Led Zeppelin, because they were one of these hard rock bands that had soul, much as Led Zeppelin had soul. But unfortunately, a lot of the hard rock bands that came out later, particularly those who came out sort of in the mid 80s onwards, they seem to lack some of the R&B roots that made something swing, even though it was so hard and so heavy. And Mountain were just such a wonderful exponent of wonderful songwriters, virtuosic yet very showy players, totally off the wall characters, and it all just came together so absolutely well. If you're not familiar with Mountain, put on the first album, start from the beginning, put on Climbing, and you will not be disappointed. Like, subscribe, and we will see you next time. Take care.